Okay, question 8. We have 3x plus 4 squared. Find an interval on which it's 1 to 1. So that means find an interval where it's an inverse, has an inverse. Make your interval as large as possible and enter an interval notation. And then we actually want to find the inverse. So I'm going to graph it because it makes it easy to see. So when we have a parabola, remember it's not 1 to 1 if we take a horizontal line and it crosses at 2 points at one time. So because there's 2 points through that parabola, it's not 1 to 1. So just like our last problem, we like to cut the parabola in half. That makes it 1 to 1. So we need to find an interval where we can cut this in half. And what's nice is that there's a vertex, right? So right here, a negative 1.3333, do you know what that fraction is? If not, we're going to have to solve. So I'm going to do it for solving because that's where we're going to cut it in half. And if you do negative 1.333 in your answer in Desmos, that's a rounded number. So we need to find the actual fraction. So we want x to be greater than or equal to negative 1.33. I know that's not going to work in Desmos, or not in Desmos, in Derivita, because it doesn't say to round. So in order to find that, it's actually right here. We take the 3x plus 4 and we set it equal to 0. That's the vertex. So minus 4 divide by 3. So did you know that negative 4/3 is equal to negative 1 repeating 3? So we actually want our domain restriction to be a fraction. So find an interval which makes it 1 to 1. So we just cut it in half using that line. Now it's saying what's the interval. So we're finding the domain of this graph. It's negative 4/3 to infinity. Negative 4/3, oh, well, we need interval notation bracket. Negative 4/3, comma, infinity. Then we want to find the inverse function restricted to that interval. So let's find the inverse. Remember, we replace f of x with y. And then we switch x and y and solve. So I'm going to solve for y now. So square root both sides. I have the square root of x equals 3y plus 4. And then I'm going to minus the 4. And that stays outside the square root. Okay, those are not like terms. It doesn't just get to go under the square root. It stays separate. And then divide by 3. So I'm going to graph it just so visually we can see what's happening. So we have the square root of x minus 4 all divided by 3. And I like to graph y equals x because can you see how that flips over that line? It's the same thing, just reflected over. So that's our inverse, restricted to that domain because they're both positive. If you would have gone the other way, that would have changed things. So let's type all that in. So square root of x minus 4 divided by 3. So notice that I had to put extra parentheses around the numerator to keep that together.